Ladies and gentlemen, if I could get your attention, please. Would this... Ladies and gentlemen, if I get your attention, please. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our webcast viewers. My name is Andrew Graham. I'm president of the Canadian Club of Toronto, and I'm your host today. Viewers, thank you very much for joining us. The Canadian Club is really proud of its track record of delivering great events like the event we have today. We actually do about 45 to 50 events like this a year. And as much as we're going to be talking about supporting the innovation economy today, I think it's really incredible that this format, getting together with other people around a table and eating lunch and listening to a speaker, continues to be as important today as it's ever been. Twitter has not disrupted the Canadian Club, I'm pleased to say. Let me take a moment to acknowledge the generous support of today's sponsors, Airden Burles, represented by Stephen Graff, and KPMG, represented by Benji Thomas. Thank you very much to both of you. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, who plays, I think, a really key role in this country. During my day job, when I'm not at the podium with the Canadian Club, is running a tech company, and I certainly think of myself as an entrepreneur, and I think BDC plays a crucial role in this country, and we're really excited to have Michael with us today. He leads a team of more than 2,200 people across the country who have I think, a very simple but a very important mission, and that's to help entrepreneurs in Canada succeed. He's president and CEO of the BDC, the Bank for Entrepreneurs, and he oversees efforts to guide and financially support those who want to create and grow businesses at all levels, whether local businesses, national businesses, or the next great Canadian-based international business. He's a seasoned leader with more than 3 decades of experience, holding senior roles at McKinsey, Bombardier, and Accenture before joining BDC. Mr. Denham has always been a devoted advocate for entrepreneurship and innovation. Let's hear his vision for growing Canadian entrepreneurship. Mr. Denham, I'm pleased to pass the Canadian Club of Toronto's podium over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
One of the things entrepreneurs do is they believe that everybody has the passion that they have. That's not the case.
On essayait de tout faire. À un moment donné, ça devient un peu chaotique. Il n'y a personne vraiment qui est en train de diriger la compagnie.
Almost every year we open one store. When we hit up to about 12, 13 stores, we realize that, oh, wait a minute, it seems like we are running out of energy.
Starting down this path was probably the most isolating and lonely experience I've ever experienced in my life.
So here's my personal journey. I started at BDC about 4 years ago. And one of the first events I attended was an event a bit like this. It was a Profit 500 event. And the event was to celebrate small companies, but the 500 most profitable small companies in Canada. And I spoke, and at the end I went back to the corner where the coffee was being served. And a gentleman who was probably in his early 40s or so, his company was 21st on the list, approached me. And he walked over to me, and he gave me a hug. Now, a lot of you have known me since I was 4 years old. I've never been much of a hugger, right? I never got a hug at Accenture. I never got a hug at McKinsey. Never got a hug at Bombardier. And this guy gave me a hug. And he went on to say, you know, if it weren't for BDC, my company wouldn't be here right now. And if it weren't for BDC, my company just wouldn't exist. And he told me a story about how BDC was there in the early days. And it was that moment early on in my role where the penny dropped. And it was a real epiphany for me personally to really get, and I got this kind of personally and viscerally, how important a role BDC plays for entrepreneurs and for entrepreneurship in the country. And Canada is a country of entrepreneurs. As Andrew said, we have 1.2 million companies in the country, and 99.8% of those companies are below 500 people. So they're small, medium-sized businesses. And these are the companies that are creating prosperity. These are the companies that are doing the hiring. And by and large, these companies are driven and led by entrepreneurs like this man. and like so many of you in the room. And BDC is the only bank devoted exclusively to entrepreneurs. We're a Crown Corporation. We've been around for 75 years. Martha and Jill and we do our best to play a complementary role alongside financial institutions. We lend to small business. We invest in small business. We give advice to small business. Over the years, we've probably talked to and worked with hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs. Right now, again, we think we play a big role in the Canadian economy. We have a lot of impact. And again, as we speak, our current clients represent over 1 million jobs and in excess of $300 billion in revenues. So when I started 4 years ago, there was lots of momentum underway at BDC. And we set ourselves an aspiration. And our aspiration was to make Canadian SMEs, so Canadian small, medium-sized enterprises, Canadian SMEs the most competitive in the world. And we knew if that was the aspiration for Canada, we had to be the best. So we set ourselves the aspiration of being the best development bank in the world. And Sam Dubach, who was our chair from 2013 to 17, and Mike Peterson, our current chair, I want to thank them both because they've been invaluable working with me, our management team, and our whole organization to move BDC in this direction. So, as so many of you know, life as an entrepreneur is hard. It's 24/7. You're on call all the time. You're constantly scrambling for resources, constantly scrambling to kind of put in place a network. So when we looked at this objective to be the best development bank in the world, we wanted to focus on those things that we knew were going to be of critical importance to entrepreneurs. So we set our focus on 3 things. The first is access, making sure that entrepreneurs have access to the resources they need to start their businesses and grow their businesses. The second is growth, helping them grow. And the third is diversity, trying to ensure that all Canadian entrepreneurs have equal opportunity to build the business of their dreams. So what I'd like to do is just take you through each of these. And we'll start with access. And access to resources is so critical to entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs need access to the financing they need when they need it. So we focus on both these things. And the first thing we tried to do is make BDC more top of mind. I think for a while, Sam, you'd agree that for many years, BDC was one of Canada's best kept secrets. And what's the point in that? So we wanted to make BDC much more top of mind so entrepreneurs would think about working with us, and working with us, we can make a difference and help them grow. So to be closer to entrepreneurs, we've increased the number of locations we have by 25%. To show entrepreneurs what we're all about, we've refreshed our brand. To be more top of mind for entrepreneurs, we now advertise and have a pretty impressive social media campaign to make sure entrepreneurs are thinking of us. And to communicate the fact that we're new and aiming very, very high, we came to market with a new logo a couple of years ago. And I love this logo. You see the stylized maple leaf, shaped like an asterisk to reflect the multiplying effect of working with BDC. You have the orchard red of Canada, the deep red maple of Canada, the Great Lakes blue of Canada, and then small case BDC to show the accessibility and the proximity that we want to have with respect to our clients. So the second key thing of access is speed. All the entrepreneurs in the room know that speed is of the essence. So we've decided we need to make sure we do our best to move at the speed of entrepreneurs. And here's one quote from one of our clients. When you need money, time is critical. You need funds right away. Otherwise, your plans will die. If it's too cumbersome or too complicated, you lose the opportunity and you're forced to move to the next thing. And for those entrepreneurs in the room, I think you'd have similar words to make the same point. So we know that time is important. And if you go back a number of years ago, we weren't agile enough. I'll just take you through an example about a working capital loan or an equipment loan. And again, a few years ago, if you wanted to get a loan like this from us, you'd come back to our business center, you'd sit down with us, we'd go through some paperwork together, and maybe 10 days later, we'd authorize the loan. The money would arrive in your bank account. And we just realized that, again, for entrepreneurs that are time-pressed for this type of lending, that isn't good enough. So we've done a number of things to automate what we do, to become faster, to become simpler. We've actually become a bit of a poster child for Apple because we have the most deployed iOS platform, I think, of any bank in the world. And as a result, we can move much more quickly. So now, for example, rather than you come to us, we'll go to you. And our account managers have their iPads in which they can authorize loans up to $750,000 for equipment lines and working capital seated right beside you. Or if you want to do it yourself, you can go to Bdc.ca. And we've got a very user-friendly kind of self-service capability to get a loan up to $100,000 very, very quickly. So how fast can we move? Well, not as fast as we'd like to, but still pretty damn fast. So we can authorize these loans in 3 minutes, again, sitting beside you in your office. And I've been speaking for about 6 minutes now. So somewhere, two BDC loans have been authorized since I started speaking. So we're committed to move with speed. And we love this. Our clients love this. And when we look at the results, we're pleased. We now have 60,000 clients, so we're up about 35% since 4 years ago. The size of our portfolio now is about 33 billion, up 30-odd% over the past few years. And again, according to some of the surveys and the research that Nielsen does, we've become, amongst entrepreneurs, the most trusted bank in Canada. So it's something we're highly focused on, and we're pleased so far with the progress that we've made. So access, making sure that entrepreneurs have access to the financing they need when they need it, we're making that happen. Let me talk now about growth. And Canada has an issue with respect to Canadian companies scaling up, to use the word. We've become a lot better than we were as a country in terms of startups, and more and more companies are being created now than ever before. But when you look at the figures, we're not scaling those companies up quickly enough. And for every 1,000 companies, there's only one per year that cross that threshold of 100 employees. 1 in 1,000. And that's just not enough, and it's not fast enough. And this matters because, again, the larger the company, the more the innovation, the more the research, the more the hiring, the more the exporting. So we've been focused on this. And as we look at helping clients grow, there are two big things that our clients need. One is advice, and the second is money. So let me talk about advice to start with. So unlike a lot of other banks, we actually have a consulting practice. We call it BDC Advisory Services. And every year we do 2,000 or so mandates where we're helping entrepreneurs tackle the key enablers of their growth: cash flow management, HR management, strategic planning, operational efficiency. And we work with our clients on these skills to help them grow. Now, to illustrate how this works, what I'd like to do is come back to one of the people you saw in the video to begin with. His name is Alain Ménard. He's the gentleman who was speaking in French. And he leads a company called Green Beaver, based in Hawkesbury, Ontario. And his is a great story. And the company focuses on aluminum-free, organic, all-natural cosmetics and beauty products. And I met Alain for the first time outside our elevator bank in Ottawa. And he saw me, and he said, "Hey, you're the CEO of BDC, aren't you?" And my inner voice said, "Oh, no, what's he going to say?" But he said, "Well, I'm so glad I met you because I am just so happy right now." And he told me his story. He said, about 3 months ago, I started working with the advisory services folks at BDC, and it's been unbelievable. When I started, I was mixing recipes, and I was pouring stuff, and I was putting labels on containers. I was dealing with FedEx and shipping stuff. And because of the work that I did with you guys, I've shifted from working in the business to working on the business. And I'm thinking now about production scheduling and customer relationship and tackling new markets. And he was just so happy with how he had transformed himself as a leader. And then I saw him, Mike, you were at this event. We had a client celebration for clients in Ottawa a few months ago, and Alain was there, and he grabbed me again. And this time he was even happier. And he said, "You know, when we started, my business was a bit of a hobby. I wasn't sure it was a full-time thing. And now it's a business. And you know what just happened?" He said to me. So I said, "What?" "I just hired a VP from P&G to join me, and the person's moving to Hawkesbury, Ontario. I couldn't do that if Green Beaver was still a hobby." Anyway, a great example, and there are thousands of like this, of people like Alain, great leaders, great businesses, who've worked with us to become now much more capable of leading their companies and helping them grow. And the second element of growth, which is so key, is money. And I think as a lot of folks in the room know, if you kind of look back over time in Canada, There are frankly, and George, you'd know this very well given the role the Business Growth Fund plays here, which is so key, is that over the years, a lot of Canadian entrepreneurs have had to sell their businesses prematurely. They've run out of access to the financing they need to kind of grow their businesses, to make them the kind of meaningful global enterprise they set out to start. And at BDC, through BDC Capital, we're a very active investor. And BDC Capital is actually Canada's largest venture capital investor. So we looked at the challenge here. We looked at the importance of ensuring entrepreneurs have continuous access to financing. And we made a lot of changes to what we do. So we've upgraded our co-investment capability in our VC group. We've adapted our venture capital strategy to allow us to write bigger checks into funds and bigger checks into companies. We now have a growth equity capability, allowing us to do more alongside groups like George's and the Business Growth Fund. And all this is to make sure that we do our best, ourselves and with others, to give entrepreneurs the access to the continuous financing they need to build these great, globally significant Canadian companies. And it's early days still, but when I look at our portfolio of companies, there are some fantastic Canadian companies that we've invested in. And I'm unbelievably optimistic for the prospect for these companies. And the next page shows just a few of them. But D-Wave in the top left, some of you may know, it's based in BC, Burnaby, BC. It's a quantum computer company. And again, the machines it makes are the fastest you could find anywhere in the world. Hopper, some of us travel. Some of us know how much of a hassle it is to kind of optimize your selection around when to fly, where to fly, get the fares, et cetera. Hopper solved that. And they've literally, their business is all about being a kind of crystal ball for predicting airfares and allowing you to book the right airfare at the right time. So growth is all about advice. It's all about money. And again, at BDC, we're trying to make this happen. So the third area where we've been focused, because it's so important, is diversity. And the angle here is to do our best to make sure that all Canadian entrepreneurs have equal opportunity to build the businesses of their dreams. And raising money is hard. I think the old adage, Peter, you got to knock on, 50 doors until you finally get a yes? But it's doubly hard and trebly hard for certain groups to go raise the money they need. And again, one of the first things that I did at BDC was I went to Communitech, which a lot of you know is an accelerator in Waterloo, and I had a breakfast. And the breakfast was with 20 young women, CEOs, leaders of tech companies. And we went around the table, and each of these women was describing to me her story when it came to fundraising and getting the equity they need to grow their business. And it was one of the most dispiriting, depressing conversations I had, because each and every one of these women, great business leaders, great businesses, great technologies, had really depressing stories about what they had to go through, what they had to endure to raise the venture capital financing they needed for their businesses. To the point that it became so difficult and so hard, most just decided to kind of pack it in and say, rather than go raise equity to help my business grow like this, I'm going to make do and self-finance and grow like this. And again, in my role at BDC, we just can't sit around and let that type of challenge endure. So about 18 or so months ago, we announced a venture capital fund that invests solely in women in tech, solely in companies that are led by women. It's a $200 million fund, which makes it the largest of its kind in the world. And we're kind of active in the market. And again, I'm unbelievably optimistic about the prospects for these women-led companies that we've been investing in. And at the same time, we've also committed to double the amount of money we lend to women entrepreneurs. We've also put in place a whole host of training sessions and networking sessions. Annie and I attended one just last night to provide women entrepreneurs with the support they need. There's another story about Fouad and Sonia, and they had arrived from Afghanistan, their husband and wife team. Fouad had a PhD from a university in Afghanistan, and Sonia had her master's in marketing from a university in Pakistan. They'd come to Canada. And they were dealing with our team in Moncton to get some financing. And our team in Moncton really did an unbelievable job getting authorization for $40,000 for Fouad and Sonia, who had no history in Canada, no credit history. to get the money to start their loan, get the money to start their business, which was a restaurant. And our team started high-fiving itself because they were so excited. With no credit history, these folks got $40,000. But then they said, you know, let's pause for a second. Fawad and Sonia, they didn't come to Canada to start a Pakistani food restaurant in Moncton. They came to Canada with dreams, and part of that dream was to build kind of digital marketing business and work with Canadian companies. So our team stopped high-fiving itself and said, you know, BDC shouldn't be about helping new Canadians get access to business, to money they need to kind of start a survival business. We should be all about working with new Canadians to give them access to what they need to build the business that they're dreaming about, that they came to Canada to start. So the results so far of what we've been doing on diversity, we feel quite good. We're basically doubled the number of women entrepreneurs we're working with. The investments we're making in a Women in Tech Fund are off to a very, very good start. And we have very specific, tailored programs in place for new Canadian entrepreneurs. We're the partners of Futurepreneur, young entrepreneurs, for Indigenous entrepreneurs, for the whole B Corp movement, and also for veterans, ex-servicemen and servicewomen who want to start their businesses. So again, diversity and creating opportunities for all Canadian entrepreneurs to build the businesses of their dream. We're trying to make that happen as well. So look, in summary, this is what we're trying to build, and this is what we humbly and proudly think the best development bank in the world looks like. You've got 2,200 employees, coast to coast, that are working hard every day to help our clients. We're focused on access and making sure that entrepreneurs have access to the financing they need when they need it. We're focused on growth through advice and through investments, helping Canadian entrepreneurs grow their business. And we're focused on diversity. Again, making sure that all Canadian entrepreneurs have the equal opportunity to build the businesses that they're trying to. So as to the future, what does the future look like? Well, the one thing I promise you is the BDC will be exactly where entrepreneurs need us to be. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you about something I care so deeply about. Thank you for the time, and thanks everyone for being here.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for those really impassioned remarks. Very, very thoughtful, and we'll do a proper thank you after. But before we get to that, we've got a number of questions coming in from the audience, which I'd love to put to you. We actually have quite a few questions about what BDC's strategy is when it comes to diversity, as well as the Women in Tech Fund that you mentioned. So you've talked about access to growth and diversity as key elements of success for Canadian entrepreneurs. Are these still going to be fundamental for success 5 years from now, or what are other key elements that are going to be important for successful entrepreneurs in the coming years?
Outside of?
I think outside of diversity, I think. So access, growth, and diversity were talked about. Maybe if I can editorialize a little bit, what are other important trends that you see in entrepreneurship, and what are important skills that you think are going to be required in the next few years?
Okay, so I guess the skills of for entrepreneurs, there's so many entrepreneurs in the room, I feel a little bit bashful even describing what a good entrepreneur looks like. And again, there's a mix of skills, but the most important thing are really kind of attributes and character. And it's the resilience, the tenacity, the not taking no for an answer. That's the kind of character attributes that fuel success for entrepreneurs. And I do think beyond the growth point you described, Andrew, one key thing for all entrepreneurs is finding a way to export and to export successfully. And one thing that we've been focused on is working as closely as we can with EDC, which is our fellow Crown Corporation, to make sure that entrepreneurs have access to all they need, not just to succeed domestically, but also to tap into markets and customer opportunities around the world. Because at the end of the day, Canada's a small country, and at the end of the day, we want entrepreneurs to be really, really successful. And for a lot of companies, that does mean finding a way to be successful outside of Canada.
Great, thank you. And now just to sort of double click on some of the diversity points that you raised. As we know, research shows that women of color and Aboriginal women are less funded and don't have equal access to funding, mentorship, support. Can you talk a bit more about how BDC is addressing this gap? We had a couple of questions along those lines.
Sure. So again, as I mentioned, there are a number of things that we have in place for various segments of entrepreneurs. On the Indigenous front, which is a big opportunity for Canada, given the size of that population and how they're growing and the many entrepreneurs that are out there. There's always been a bit of a challenge because on-reserve lending is hard for a lot of financial institutions because it's difficult to take security. So we have we have an Indigenous business unit with a team that's coast to coast that has a tailor-made lending product which is relevant for Indigenous entrepreneurs. But more importantly, we've just literally last week, through the federal budget, put in place the elements of a new fund called the Indigenous Growth Fund that we're going to be bringing to market with NACA, which is the National Aboriginal Capital Corporation, which will be funding, they're called AFIs, Aboriginal Financial Institutions. But the net effect is going to be to get hundreds of millions of dollars more financing liquidity brought to bear to help Indigenous entrepreneurs across the country. And these AFIs, Aboriginal Financial Institutions, are particularly good and very penetrated in their communities, and it will be a great vehicle to make sure this financing is put to the best use.
Thank you. Speaking specifically about the Women in Tech Fund that you spoke about, the $200 million fund, how much of that has been deployed so far?
So right now we're ahead of plan. So we've deployed, I think there've been about 25 companies we've invested in. And it's somewhere between about 15 or so, $20 million invested. There's a bunch that's been reserved at the same time to support their growth. So we'd always like to do more. We're pleased with their progress, but I think what pleases us most is the quality of companies that we've got to know, the quality of the pipeline. And it's really been borderline breathtaking how many incredibly high quality companies there are that are led by women.
That's great. Just sort of stepping up a level here, just going from sort of more to the macro. Where do you see the Canadian economy heading? The audience wants to know.
What do you think, Sam? Yeah. So our view, and I just spoke to our chief economist, is not dissimilar to the views of all the other banks. I mean, somewhere in the kind of 1.5% to 2% growth range. But what reinforces that is we're constantly in touch with our clients. So every year we survey thousands of entrepreneurs to ask them to comment on their investment intentions. And since it's business investment that's such a key driver of economic activity, this is actually a pretty good proxy into what growth prospects look like. And again, the results that we did from the survey in January this year are quite similar to the results from January last year. So again, we anticipate from that, again, it kind of lines up well with what the economists are saying in kind of fairly stable rate of growth. 2019, not too different, 2018.
Thanks for that. Can you talk more about the efforts that the BDC has made to make lending accessible online and how that's become, or to what extent has that become an important channel for your team?
Right. And again, Borrowell, for those who don't know Borrowell's also in this game and is really facilitating access to all sorts of Canadians to appropriate finance, and you guys do it incredibly rapidly. So we're constantly trying to up our game, and we realize that like for us, what's most important is for entrepreneurs to get access to what they need. And if it comes from BDC, great. If it comes from the Business Growth Fund or from Borrowell or from some other, from Tangerine or from all the credit unions coast to coast, that's also great. And we realize that as more and more investment takes place, fintechs are taking more and more of a space with respect to providing financial solutions to our clients and to entrepreneurs. And we think that's great. But it's setting an expectation around speed, and it's setting an expectation around simplicity that I think all financial institutions need to meet. So that's propelling our investment efforts. So all that to say that every few months there's some new generation, some new version of technology we're introducing. And the hope is to get, again, as close to kind of real-time instant authorization as possible. And we anticipate that for a lot of our clients, we'll be in that situation sometime between now and the end of the calendar year.
That's great. I think we've got time for maybe one or two more. Can you talk about the BDC's, how it views its place in the market vis-a-vis large banks in terms of what are the kinds of loans the BDC is funding that why wouldn't one of the larger Canadian banks or a mid-sized bank do that?
Right. So we are a complementary lender. So what we don't want to do, and we're a Crown Corporation, we're funded by the Government of Canada, we're kind of profitable. Our ROEs kind of high single digits over the course of the cycle. But what we don't want to do is compete on price with the banks, because that would be taking unfair advantage of our cost of capital. So, or with the credit unions. So we try to, we're a complementary lender, so we try to work alongside the banks. And I think in every situation, an entrepreneur will have an operating line and cash management relationship with the bank, some cases term loan, and we try to work alongside that. And I remember Jordy Conrad's here. Jordy and I spent a lot of time when I first started, and I still remember that one of the advice that you gave to many of your network and many of your clients is to make sure you have a great relationship with your chartered bank, because that's so essential. With EDC, that's so essential because you position yourself to export, and with BDC. And if our clients can get that troika of financial partners in place, I think good things result from that.
Great. Well, we're out of time here, but thank you so much, Michael, for answering these questions. I think it's been a great back and forth, and if you'd like to take your seat, we'll do a proper thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, everybody.
It's always, we're lucky to have many great speakers at the Canadian Club. It's always extra impressive, I feel, when we have someone who can speak so impressively without notes. So Michael, it was really a great pleasure to hear your remarks today and to hear the stories that you brought and the passion that you brought for really the community that you serve, which is Canada's entrepreneurs and many of the people creating so many important jobs across the country. So thank you so much for joining us today and sharing both your thoughts on the BDC and the role it plays in the economy, and also, as I mentioned, the real passion that you've brought as a business person and as a leader to the organization. So we really appreciate you sharing your remarks with our audience today. And I'm sure it goes without saying that there are many BDC people in the room, and the thanks extends to all of you for the important work you do across the country. So thank you very much for joining us, and again, for the work you do through the BDC. Just before we wrap up, let me mention a few upcoming events. First of all, on Thursday, April 4th, we have the Honorable Peter Bethenfalvey, who'll be speaking about the province's fiscal health. On April 10th, we're very pleased to have an entrepreneur, actually, Rebecca McKillican, who's CEO of Well.ca, who's going to be speaking about the future of retail in Canada. We're doing a series of entrepreneurs, both in tech and in other sectors, and we're really pleased to have Rebecca joining us for that. And I'd like to extend another round of thanks to today's sponsors, Airden Burles, as well as KPMG. Thank you very much to both of you. And finally, a big thank you to MediaEvents.ca, Canada's online event space, and VVC for live streaming today's event. Thanks to all of you for joining us today. Look forward to seeing you again in the future. Have a great afternoon.